Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of many available by free download or podcast. The hundreds of hours of lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live. The live lecture is accompanied by an online chat, allowing listeners to read additional explanations related to the lecture and providing an opportunity to ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate or tune into our continuous web broadcast, visit our website for more information at gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. For more information or to make a donation, visit our website at gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy. The 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is called Tzadi, although in modern Hebrew, most speakers refer to it as Tzadik, but in the ancient form is pronounced Tzadi. And the letter makes the sound that you hear at the beginning of that word, th, a T and an S. As the 18th letter, it corresponds to the number 90. And if you've studied any form of mysticism, you know that the number 9 has a lot of significance. 18, of course, Kabbalistically is 1 plus 8, which is 9. And 18 is a combination of two nines. And 9 is a deeply beautiful number in mathematics when you observe the patterns and structures that the 9 makes, particularly in multiples. And this is important because Kabbalah is a science of numbers. It is a science that exposes the underlying structure of all matter and energy. The letter Tzadi is probably the most mysterious number in the Hebrew alphabet because about it almost nothing is known. It is veiled, it is concealed. In fact, even in modern times, scholars of Hebrew argue over its origins, uncertain as to its roots, and unsure as to its symbols, because those who have been initiated into the knowledge have not revealed those things. So Tzadi, in the Zohar, is said to be the one that conceals the secret of the Torah. It is the letter that conceals the secret of the path. And even though throughout the previous 17 letters in this course, we've explained many mysteries in relation with the path towards the light, it is Tzadi that condenses them and represents them and pulls it all together. You see, at the 18th letter, we've reached the moment of to be or not to be. It is the moment of decision when one is approaching the end of the letters, the 22nd letter. And it is here in Tzadi that we define ourselves for the light or for the darkness. All the previous letters have explained to us the factors of the path, the elements that are involved in our longing in life. But it is Tzadi that defines us. Tzadi is a letter of action. It is defined by action, not by belief, and not by any theory. So, Tzadi represents the number 90. And if you've studied the Bible, you might recall that the wife of Abraham, Sarah, had her son, Yitzhak, when she was 90. And this is a reference to the letter Tzadi. And furthermore, at that moment, Abraham was 100 years old. People read the Bible literally, think it literally means he was 100 years old. But no, that 100 is a reference to the letter Kuf, which comes after Tzadi. And you'll learn about that in the next lecture. The relationship between Kuf and Tzadi is very important. In fact, it's underscored in the modern mispronunciation of the letter's name, Tzadik, because that K sound is a Kuf. Tzadi and Kuf are very tightly linked. They're next to each other in the alphabet. And some say that pronunciation, Tzadik, comes because when you recite the letters of the alphabet, you'd say Pe, Tzadi, Kuf. So that K automatically attaches itself to the end of the word. And it became a habit. Nonetheless, between Sarah and Abraham, we see these two numbers, 90 and 100. These are the letters Tzadi and Kuf. And between these two letters is a great mystery of initiation. This mystery of initiation will be explained further in later lectures. But if you've studied the works of Samael Aun Weor, then you know about the minor mysteries and the major mysteries. So this relationship between Tzadi and Kuf is related to that. Tzadi, when you write just the word Tzadi, which is here, it's spelled Tzadi, Dalet, Yod, Kuf. Or you spell it Tzadi, Dalet, Yod. That word actually means to be on the path. Tzadi, to be on the path. One is not on the path simply by believing in it. In the same way that owning a printed map and believing that the map leads you somewhere does not take you to that place. It is only when you walk on the roads of that map that you go there. Tzadi is that. The word Tzadi means to be on the path, to be walking it, to be doing it. Not to just believe in it or read it, think about it or talk about it, to do it. That Kuf at the end is the first entrance into a major initiation. Tzaddik in Hebrew means righteous one. To be a tzaddik is to be on the path with initiation. So you see in this letter immediately why it defines us. Because you see, the cosmic hierarchies do not measure a man by the contents of his beliefs or theories, but by his actions. A woman is not valued by her intentions, but by what she does. A tzaddik is someone who is on the path, who is bridging the gap, or who has gone beyond number 90, number 100, number 200, number 300, and beyond. You see, those later numbers correspond to the later letters of the alphabet. Kuf, Resh, Shin, etc. But those numbers also correspond esoterically to spiritual ages. In the internal worlds, we have age, but it is not age of time. It is age of spirit. And that esoteric age is a measurement of our spiritual level, or the degree of initiation that our innermost has acquired. You see, it is our innermost who acquires initiations, not us. It is our innermost who becomes the perfect Adam, not us. It is our innermost who becomes Nefesh Haya, a resurrected master, not us. We are a human soul, merely a shadow of that which is above. In Hebrew, the word shadow is tzel. It's spelled Tzadi Lamed. It means shade or shadow. And this is why David, in his beautiful writing, said, "Man walks as but a shadow." Because we are that. None of us are a real man or a real woman, because we don't have Haya, that soul, life. We don't have the Elohim shining in our consciousness. We have darkness. We are a tzel, a shadow, a shade, a ghost, the dead, as Jesus said. Spiritually dead. Psychologically alive. The ego is alive. The shadow of the tree of life. We are a shadow because we have our klipoth very alive. Klipoth is the shadow of the tree of life. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge in Hebrew are both called etz. This word etz means tree, and it's spelled ayin tzadi. Our tree is a shadow, and we can prove this to ourselves merely by closing our eyes and looking within. And what we see is darkness, shadow. And when we watch our dreams, we see shadows. We see vague things that we scarcely remember. And when we look back upon our life, we see fleeting shadows. We see life through a glass darkly. We live life as a shadow, a shade, scarcely casting any light from God. Yet we study in the Bible that Adam was made into the image of God. And all of the spiritual people in this day and age read this literally and presume that God must be a man, a big man maybe, but a man with a beard who sits on a throne and who looks like us. But this is not the meaning of the word image in that verse in Genesis. That word is tselem. Tzadi lamed mem. You see, it's just like the word shade or shadow, which is tzel, but it has a mem on the end. Tselem, tzalem, image. But that image is different from a shadow. Because it has mem. And mem is, of course, related with the waters, mayim, which is the Divine Mother, the force of life. When Adam was made into the image of the Elohim, Adam was made not as a visual image, because that word tselem is not visual. The Hebrew word tselem does not mean a visual image. It means a spiritual image, a psychological image. It is something related with the soul. But what's interesting is when you read that verse, it doesn't say one image. It says, and Elohim created Adam in the image, and in the likeness of the Elohim created he them. There are two images there. Two, image and likeness. Not just one. This is a great mystery. But what it corresponds to is our innermost and our terrestrial person. Two levels. In Kabbalah, we call them Zeir Anpin and Nukva. Symbolically, they are male and female. But they are simply two levels of ourselves. We can call them soul and spirit. In Greek, Paul called them soma suchikon, which is the lower part, the terrestrial man. In the Bible, it's called the natural man. And then there's the soma pneumatikon, which is the soul, the spirit image. The suchikon means soul image. Pneumatikon means spirit image. So we have here the spirit and the soul, the two parts of us. We as terrestrial people need to unite those parts to make them one. That is the purpose of why Elohim created Adam. This is why Adam was created, separated into Ish and Isha, male and female, so that they could unite again in order to unite all the parts of the being into one great being. But of course, that process was interrupted. And the result was that we abused of the tree of knowledge, Etz Da'at. And impurity was born, Ra. When that impurity was born, we became a shadow. We were expelled from Eden, out of bliss. And that image of God, the pneumatikon, withdrew. That light of the Shekinah, that light of the Divine Mother, the Mem, that irradiated the primordial Adam and Chava, withdrew from them because of sin. And when that light left them, they saw themselves and realized that they were naked of that light, and they felt ashamed. You see, that nakedness was not physical, but spiritual. It was at that moment that humanity ceased being a tselem, an image of God, of Elohim, and became a tzel, a shade, a shadow. And we left Eden because of our own actions. A great tragedy, which of course initiated suffering, death, and pain. Nonetheless, it is possible to restore that state. We have these teachings. We have an innermost. We have a physical body. These elements make it possible. All we need then is will. Willpower to do it. That will is not over anything but ourselves. When we study the ancient state of humanity as Tselem, as an image of the Elohim, we see that in the Bibles, in the scriptures, that the primordial humanity was in charge of nature. that all of nature bowed before the man. And that Adam had dominion over everything. We see that, as it says in the Zohar, when the Holy One, blessed be He, created the universe, He made all the creatures in the world in their appropriate shape. He then created man in the supernal image and made him ruler by power of this image over all creatures. As long as man continues in the world, all creatures look up to him. And when they see the supernal image of man, they feel dread and tremble before him, as it is written, "And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth and upon every bird." This is true when they look and see in him the supernal image, and the soul is in him. But Rabbi Elazar said that the image of the righteous does not change, even when the soul is not in them. When a man does not walk in the ways of the Torah, his sacred image is altered, and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky then prevail against him. When the sacred image was changed, so was the image of man, who then received the image of the other animals, so that creatures are no longer fearful of him and can have power over him. It would be easy to study these scriptures and read them literally, to interpret these scriptures as literally referring to beasts like lions and tigers and dogs and horses. And that's what most people do. But that's not the meaning. It would be rather absurd for the purpose of creation to merely be for mankind to dominate the animals of the earth. Wouldn't it make more sense for the vast, beautiful universe to have a greater purpose than merely that? It does. Those beasts are symbolic. Those beasts of the field are in you. The field is your body. The beasts are the desires that try to take control of your body. Instinct, passion. The birds of the air represent thoughts, ideas, desires in the mind. To be a real Adam, to be a real Hara, is to be in dominion over your mind, to have dominion over your body, to command your body and mind, not the other way around. Unfortunately, in us, we see that our body rules our mind. When we get a little bit hungry, we get cranky, we get demanding, impatient. We want to eat what we want to eat now. And if anything stands in our way, we become terrible beasts. Tigers, lions. We lash out at each other. Over what? A meal. Even worse is when a sexual desire takes control of our body and mind. And we will throw away a marriage. We will commit crimes even in the presence of children because of lust. And what of anger? A terrible beast. And what of greed? A terrible beast. And envy and jealousy. All of these things are beasts of the field and birds of the air, which control us because we are shadows. If we have inside of us the image of the righteous, the supernal image, the presence of God, those beasts cannot dominate us. It's impossible. How can a beast dominate God? How can greed or anger or lust overcome the power of the Elohim? It cannot. This is our need, is to bring the presence of our own innermost that supernal image, soma pneumatikon, the spiritual man, the real Adam, into our presence, our temple. And by doing so, we can enter the path and become a tzaddik, a righteous one. Daniel did this. Everyone studied the book of Daniel. And Daniel was a righteous man, a tzaddik. And because of his righteousness, he was in conflict with those who are not righteous. But most of all, with his own mind. The story of Daniel represents his development and growth. And in a great moment of trial, he was put into a pit filled with lions. But he didn't become identified. He didn't moan and cry and complain to all his friends and call everybody and say, my life is so terrible. I got put in this pit of lions and now I don't know what I'm going to do. They're going to eat me. He didn't do that. He was perfectly serene because he believed in, he felt, he knew, and he had within himself his innermost. That supernal image. And because of that, the lions bowed. In the story it says, a great angel came and protected him. Who is that angel? His own inner angel, his innermost. You see, right there, Daniel shows how one becomes a tzaddik. Through serenity, through remembrance of God, and by respecting the covenant, by upholding the covenant. It says here that in the Zohar, that the angel closed the mouths of the lions to protect Daniel. That angel, of course, is the innermost of Daniel. And the way that we do the same is to make sure that we never commit a mistake and forget the covenant, forget the supernal image, the tselem of God. It's very interesting that the Zohar says, Rabbi Yossi said that a man should beware of sinning and not deviate right or left. Although he guards himself, he should search himself daily for sins. Although he guards himself. What is that? To guard oneself. It is to be in a state of self-observation continually. To continually watch oneself with willpower, consciously. To guard oneself, to protect oneself, to be a warrior. Spiritually speaking, psychologically speaking. Although he guards himself, he should search himself daily for sins. For when a man rises from his bed, 2 witnesses stand before him and accompany him the whole day. This is in the Zohar. 2 witnesses. What are those witnesses? Vav and Zayin in the letters. Od and Obd. The 2 serpents that rise upon the spinal column of the initiate. 2 energetic channels that connect directly to the monad, to our innermost. These 2 channels relate very specifically to our willpower and to our consciousness, to our ability to be aware of ourselves, but also for the ability of the monad to be inside of us. And then the Zohar says, when a man wishes to rise, he opens his eyes, and the witnesses say to him, let your eyes look straight on, and let your eyelids look straight before you. This is a very beautiful Kabbalistic statement. Once again, if we read it literally, we'll miss the meaning. The statement says, when a man wishes to rise, Well, first of all, who is a man? We're not talking about a terrestrial person, a body physically. A man is Ish. Ish is Aleph Yod Shin, man. Isha is woman. Aleph Shin He. A man is Ish. That man is Manas, mind, soul. What does it mean to rise? It doesn't mean to get out of bed. It means to rise back to Eden, to rise up the mount, to approach God as Moshe did, to rise through initiation. So it says, when a man wishes to rise, he opens his eyes. The eyes are ayin, the 16th Hebrew letter. Those eyes are spiritual. Those eyes are opened through self-observation, through meditation, through transmutation, through work. When he opens his eyes, the Zohar continues, and the witnesses say to him, let your eyes look straight on. Let your eyelids look straight before you. Those witnesses are Vav and Zayin, the two serpents that entwine upon our spinal column. And through those two energetic channels, we receive information from God, from our innermost, and from our soul. This is how we're given guidance on the path. And that guidance is, let your eyes be straight before you. Let your ayin see the path straight to your innermost. The Zohar continues, when he prepares himself to go, they say to him, make even the path of your foot. Thus, when a man walks, he should guard against his sins the whole day. When night falls, he should examine and search his actions for that day to repent for his deeds. He should always search them so he can repent before his master, as it is written, and my sin is ever before me. Those of you who have studied Gnosis and the teachings of Samael Aun Weor for some time will recognize what's described here. This is called retrospection. It is written in the Zohar. It was not invented by Samael Aun Weor. It is ancient. The practice of retrospection is universal in all religions. It is the culmination of an entire day's work. The day's work is to be continually observant of oneself, to guard oneself against one's own mind. In other words, to guard your soul, your consciousness, from the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. And at the end of that day, to reflect. Because until you're finished with the work, you will not have a perfect day. You will make mistakes because you have ego. All of us have beasts in our field and birds in our air. And a lot of them. Thus, we do our best during the day, and in the evening, we meditate. This action of meditation is not to sit and space out. It is to sit in conscious reflection upon one's mind, to look at oneself, to reflect upon the contents of the day, without prejudice, without self-love, but also without self-hate. To look at oneself objectively, to see what one did in fact, not what you would have liked to have done, not what you would have wished had happened, but what actually happened. And when you engage in that activity, you'll discover that your mind refuses to let you do it. Your mind does not want to die. Your mind does not want you to see the truth of it. Because you see, your mind is the enemy. The struggle that the tzaddik engages in is against his or her own mind. It is not against any outside force. It is not against other groups, other people, your spouse, your boss, your children. It is against yourself. Most difficult battle possible. And the problem is we always believe we're doing our best. We justify ourselves. We think we know what we're doing. We fool ourselves. We cheat ourselves continually. Tzaddik, this letter, hides all of this. It is the 18th letter, which relates with the 18th arcanum, which in the Tarot is called twilight. This Tarot image, this arcanum, represents the duality, the struggle between black and white. 2 nines, 2 dogs, 2 beasts, 2 mountains, 2 moons, 2 forces, black and white. We have to pass through the 18 and enter into the 19, kuf, inspiration. This is a great battle. It is not easy. To do it, we have to raise up the yod. In the middle of the word tzadi or tzaddik is a yod. This yod is the hidden clue of this letter. And if you look at the letter tzadi, you see on its upper right edge a yod. It is a yod mounted to the back of a nun. The letter nun is bent over. But why? How? First of all, let us remember what the letter nun represents. The letter nun represents a fish. In Aramaic, that word means fish, which of course is the ancient symbol of the Christians. It is also the ancient symbol of the Tanin, or the Leviathan, that great whale in the waters, whose significance and meaning we discussed previously. But Kabbalistically, the nun is that fish in your waters. It is the sexual energy in your waters. The nun represents the forces of Christ. And this is why Yahushua is called the son of Nun. Because Christ is born from the power of the nun. The power that's hidden in the sexual energy. And what is Yod? We described in all of the lectures Yod. Yod represents Keter, the first Sephirah, the being of the being, the root of our root. The Yod also represents you and me, Malkut, the Nukva. The Yod also represents the covenant, the sacred agreement between Noah and the nation of Israel. So there's a great deal of significance in that little letter of Yod, and that's why the Nun is bowed. It is bowed under that burden. Because in order for Keter, the light of the Ein Sof, manifested, to rise in us and return to its source, thereby creating a tzaddikim, a perfect soul, it can only do it through the nun, the letter nun, the sexual energy, which rises up the spine. You see, that's why this yod is moving up the back of the nun. It represents the force of Keter in us that must rise through our sexual force. And this is why the letter Tzadi has always been concealed. This is why you will not find this explanation anywhere else. Because it is the clue of the Torah. It says in Proverbs, when the whirlwind passeth, the wicked is no more. What is a whirlwind? It is the force of the Aleph in action. The Aleph represents the air. And when that spins and moves, it is the force of Keter. Because you remember, Aleph relates with Keter in the same way the Yod does. And an Aleph is only 3 Yods in action. The whirlwind passeth, the wicked is no more. And Proverbs continues, but the Tzaddik, the righteous, is an everlasting yesod. It says that in the Bible. The righteous is an everlasting yesod. Of course, yesod means foundation. Yesod is the 9th sphere, the 9th sephira. It is the nukva, joined with Malkut. Yesod and Malkut are nukva. Yesod is the 9th sphere, and on our physical body, the tree of life superimposed over us, Yesod is the sexual organs. So the secret of the Tzadi is in Yesod. That's why Tzadi has a Yod in it. Yesod is the word Yod with Samek in the middle. Yod, Samek. Samek is the serpent. Yesod. Great mysteries and secrets hidden there. And what is the reason for Tzadi to be concealed, asks the Zohar. It is the inclusion of the letter Nun and the adjoining letter Yud from the Tetragrammaton, which is also the Holy Brit, which came and mounted on the letter Nun, thereby creating the letter Tzadi. The Holy Brit. This word Brit is from Brit Milah in Hebrew. Maybe you haven't heard that term, but I'm sure you've heard the English word circumcision. It says here, why is the Tzadi concealed? Because of the inclusion of the letter Nun, the letter Yud, which is the Brit, the circumcision. The Yod represents that. But what is circumcision? We've explained throughout the lectures, this is not a physical ritual. Circumcision is a symbolic pact that is energetic, psychological. The physical aspect, as Paul explained, is irrelevant. What is relevant is the spiritual and psychological aspect. For us to observe the covenant, to respect the Holy Brit, is to circumcise the beasts of the field in us. To harness that force. To be in control. To have dominion over the animals within us. That is the meaning of circumcision. The Holy Covenant. The Brit Milah. When one observes that covenant, one is in dominion of oneself, or aspiring to be. The Zohar explains this to us. It says, "Come and behold. All Israel have a portion in the world to come." Why? Because they observe the covenant on which the world is established. Thus, is as it is written in the verse, "If my covenant be not day and night, it were as if I had not appointed the ordinance of heaven and earth." meaning that Israel keep in holiness of the covenant of circumcision by never desecrating it with the spilling of semen or by sexual misconduct. Explicitly clear. So why is it no one observes the covenant? Strange. The Zohar continues. Therefore, Israel, who has accepted the covenant and observes it, let's stop there. Who is Israel? Many people in the world now claim to be the nation of Israel. Not even just the Jews, but many Christians claim they are the true nation of Israel. But upon what basis do they make this claim? Belief? The scriptures nowhere say that. The scriptures say this: Israel accepts the covenant and observes it. And what is the covenant? It is the circumcision of the sexual energy. It is the controlling of that power. It is to respect the tree of knowledge, to abandon animal behavior, and to adopt angelic behavior, primarily sexually. And from that sexual root, it becomes possible to adopt those behaviors throughout the rest of the mind. So it says, Israel, who has accepted the covenant and observes it, has a portion in the world to come. Furthermore, as a result, they are called Tzadi, righteous. Tzadi. As I mentioned, this word means righteous one. It is spelled Tzadi, Dalet, Yesod, or Yod, Kuf. Tzaddik. Who is a tzaddik? Someone who is on the path. And how is one on the path? By respecting the covenant. And what is the covenant? Circumcision of the sexual energy. Not the body. Not the physical body. But the astral body. The vital body. The mental body. The causal body. That is where the circumcision must occur. In the mind. This is why Jesus explained clearly that adultery is not merely the physical act, it is an act in the mind. When one observes, looks upon a woman with lust, one has committed adultery. That is a breaking of the covenant. This is not negotiable. This is not something that you can let your mind say, well, I didn't mean it, or well, I couldn't help it. Or I'm trying to work on myself, so I let myself look. These are lies. These are called mental sophistry. And these are the works of Satan. This is how your inner Satan works. Tricking you to continue with your mistakes. One has to dominate that. Change it. By respecting the covenant, we begin to harness that sexual energy. The Yud, the Brit, represents the circumcision of that force, to stop it, to cut it from leaving, from being wasted, from being spilled. Of course, that act begins physically, to stop the spilling physically. But one fornicates in the mind, in the heart, as Jesus explained. Circumcision is important in every level of the mind. When we do that, when we begin to observe ourselves regularly, to stop ourselves from wasting those forces, when we dominate the beasts of our body and the birds of our air, we begin to restrain that fire. That fire is Esh in Hebrew. Esh is Aleph, Shin. Esh. I told you that Ish and Isha are man and woman. And the difference between them is the Yod and the He, the phallus and the uterus.
If you take the phallus and uterus out of the words for man and woman, in both cases you have the word esh, fire. The holy circumcision, the symbol of that, represents the circumcision of this force, the restraint of it, the respect of it, the redirection of it. You see, that energy is the sexual energy. It is the force in Yesod, represented by that letter Samek. And when that force is restrained, it no longer flows out through the physical body, propagating and creating the rivers in hell, our own psychological hell. Instead, those rivers of light are returned through Yesod, Eden, and begin to flow up through the tree of life, giving life, Haya. This is that well of everlasting life, the well of living water, that Mayim Haya, that Jesus spoke of. Those waters create, and it's from there that we can begin to create the soul. This is the progression from 90 to 100 to 200 to 300. Through the letters, through initiation. Raising the serpent of the Kundalini. First in the physical body, Malkut. Second, in the vital body, Yesod. Third, in the astral body, Hod. Fourth, in the mental body, Netzach. And then, Tiferet, the causal body. Then one becomes a soul. This is to reach the age 500. To reach Tiferet. This process is a process of creation. Creating the chariot, the Merkabah. We explained many times that this is all rooted in the fire, the Esh. And when you understand that it is a combination of the covenant, which is spelled Bet, Resh, Yod, Tav, and Esh, which is spelled Aleph, Shin. When that Esh is in the middle of Brit, the word spells Bereshit. Creation, the first word of the Bible. This is how we rise to initiation. When the Esh, the fire, enlivens that circumcision of the spirit, that Brit becomes Bereshit. And then, Bereshit bara Elohim. In wisdom, the Elohim create the soul. The heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth are those two images. This is how the Elohim created Adam in the likeness and the image of the Elohim, through Bereshit. Bereshit is that covenant, Brit, inflamed with Esh. The Yod in Yesod contains that mystery. The Yod rises on the back of the Nun. And this is why the Tzadi represents the one who is working in the path, the one who is rising, who is creating the soul. This process is gradual. It must be earned. It must be fought for. It does not come easily, and it does not come by belief or membership or by paying donations or by being a good member of a group. It comes by dying through psychological death. It comes through transmutation or spiritual birth. And it comes through sacrifice. Compassion, helping others. These three forces, united, empower Tzadi. Many make the mistake of believing that merely by transforming their sexual energy, they can accomplish this work. Some others make the mistake that merely by meditation, they can accomplish this work. Or merely through service to others, they can accomplish this work. But these three alone are incomplete. These three have to be united in perfect equilibrium with each other. Birth, death, and sacrifice. These three are not defined by external action as well. Many believe that only through external service, only through external signs, sensations, are they accomplishing the three factors. In other words, people use their terrestrial eyes and look literally to see the three factors. Impossible. The three factors are psychological. They're spiritual. You cannot judge another person based on their physical actions. One can only judge oneself. And even then, one must be cautious. Because we tend to judge with our ego. This word tzadi has a deep relationship with the word justice also. Righteousness is its translation. It says throughout the Gospels, throughout the Scriptures, that the righteous are the ones who will inherit the land, the promised land. But who is righteous? The entire Pistis Sophia explains this. Who is the one who is righteous? It is Sophia. Who is Sophia? Your soul. It is not our terrestrial person. It is our soul. It is something deep, something hidden from the eyes of the flesh. If we look for righteousness, we have to look for it within, not outside. Not in another person, not in the mirror. You see, a true tzaddik is unknown. In the Kabbalah it says, at any time in the world, there are at least 32 tzaddikim, righteous ones. But this is symbolic, not literal. In the Bible it says, God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham said, what if there are tzaddik there? What if there are tzaddikim in Sodom? Would you still destroy it? And God says, I will not destroy it if there are at least 10. 10 is the number of Yod. It doesn't mean literally 10 people in that city. It means if the circumcision is respected, if the covenant is abided by, if that Yod is kept pure, God will not destroy Sodom. But of course, there were no pure tzaddikim in that city, and God destroyed it by the fire, by Esh. That story is symbolic of what happens to us if we don't respect the sign of the covenant. That fire, that Esh, burns us. And we are all experiencing that. Look at how the sexual fire is destroying humanity. We all love the internet, but do you know that its number one use is the propagation of pornography? It is its number one use by far. Some estimates put it at 80% or more of internet use is for pornography. What kind of tool is that? How is that bettering humanity? It is destroying humanity. That Esh, the sexual fire, is destroying the mind. It is destroying the body. Because those who become addicted to pornography destroy their heart. They lose the capacity to love. They become animals. That's why their relationships fail. That's why they abuse children. That's why they abuse themselves. That's why they develop all kinds of psychological problems. Because of that esh, that fire. You see, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was not with physical fire. It was psychological fire. And this humanity all around us is suffering the same fate. That esh, if it is respected, if it is circumcised, transformed, becomes light. It becomes the fire of the Pentecost, the fire of Christ, the fire that illuminates the soul. A tzaddikim is one who is raising that fire through the yod, from the nun. That nun, I explained, relates to the sexual seed, but that nun is also Christ. Yahushua is the son of Nun. Christ is born from that seed. Through the process of that yod rising up our spinal column. Step by step. Ordeal after ordeal. Because you see, the soul is not created by skipping through flowers. It is created by descending into the abyss and working with the fire. It is created through trial, through suffering. You see, a diamond is made in that way. A diamond is in the earth, and the force of fire and pressure, great forces that act, produce that diamond. The same is true of your soul. This is why Jesus said, with patience ye shall possess thy soul. Not through belief, not by membership. Patience. Work. That esh rises through each of these sephiroth, creating the man. You see, that esh fills the Brit and becomes Bereshit. And then, Bereshit bara Elohim. The Elohim creates. The Elohim creates the man in the image and likeness of the Elohim. The image comes first, the tselem. That image that emerges from the mem, the water. That is the arising of a soul through levels of initiation. Until the point at which we reach chesed, the innermost. It is here that that soul makes a choice of how to proceed. The decision is made in relation with the Sephiroth or initiation of Tiferet. How to continue on. Which path to take. It's at this point that this soul chooses their cosmic destiny. This is something hard for us to grasp. Nonetheless, that soul is established once again in Eden. As a tzaddikim, a righteous one. Do you have any questions? Yeah, the final tzaddik represents those two witnesses that I was discussing. You see in them the Vav and Zayin, who are united on the spinal column. That is how one is a tzaddik, is when those serpents are risen. And through that, one sees that one's ayin, one's eyes are opened. If you recall, the ayin looks very similar to tzadi. Nearly identical. And that's because they're closely related. Furthermore, the primary form of tzadi is the closest shape to aleph. And this is why the two letters are called mates. There are 22 Hebrew letters, and so there are 11 pairs. And tzadi and aleph are a pair. And you can see why now from this lecture. Through the tzadi, one becomes aleph. The power of the aleph is realized through tzadi. Any other questions? It's also said that the tzadi could represent a fishhook. But scholars have always struggled to explain why. But now from this understanding, you can understand why. The nun is the fish, right? And if one wants to draw the power of the nun, that fish in the waters, up, who does it? The fisherman, Christ, who said, I will teach you to become fishers of men. The hook is the yod. That force of keter in the yod, which is in the sex. And Christ uses that force to pull us up so that we rise through initiation. That's why tzadi is a fisher. If we wish to become fishers of men, we have to incarnate Christ. Because the one who is the fisherman is Christ. The men are those who are becoming tzaddikim, righteous ones. There was a question back there?
Yeah, student wants to know, when working with the three factors, transmutation, meditating on the ego, and working to learn to sacrifice for others, this is external in the beginning?
Like everything in this teaching, in order to learn the three factors, one begins physically. We have to work here and now in our physical body. We learn transmutation in the physical body. We learn meditation in the physical body. We have to learn to sacrifice for others in the physical body. Why? Because this is the only place where we right now can have consciousness of ourselves. We're so weak consciously, spiritually, that if I told you first, you have to learn how to transmute in the astral plane, who could do it? We're asleep in the astral plane. Most of us don't even remember dreams, much less are awakened in Hod. So we begin here with the three factors. Yet, that is not enough. To transmute physically is the beginning. To meditate on one's egos in the physical body is the beginning. To sacrifice for others with your physical skill is the beginning. But it is not all. Those efforts have to continue into our psychological world, so that we learn to transmute the physical body, the energy in the physical body, and then we learn to transmute the energy in the vital body. And then we learn to transmute the energy in the astral body, the mental, the causal. all the energies in our entire being. And likewise, we have to learn to meditate and comprehend our egos, comprehend our mind in every level. One has to learn to sacrifice in every level. The three factors are not merely physical behaviors. They go far beyond that. Any other questions? So to synthesize that, we can say that a tzadikim, or a tzadik, is a person who is on the path. To enter the path, one has to perform the three factors. This is unavoidable. You don't enter the path simply by meditating, or simply by transmuting, or simply by sacrificing. You enter the path through initiation, which is internal, which is spiritual, not physical. You might pass through initiations in schools or groups or religions, and these are good. They're symbolic. The real initiations, though, are in the internal worlds. And by passing through those initiations, one becomes a tzaddik. The first one, the main one, is when one passes from 90 to 100. From tzadi to kuf. In other words, from the minor mysteries to the major mysteries. That is a real tzaddik. As a matter of politeness and respect, we can say that those who are passing the minor mysteries, which are the ages 10 through 90, spiritually speaking, are tzaddikim. But we only say this out of politeness. Because one doesn't become a true tzaddik until one starts to create the soul, to rise the kundalini in the spine, to incarnate that force in oneself. That is how one becomes a real tzaddik.
You said that the letter explains that it's to be on the path. It's 18 because it's a combination of two nines. It's a man hermit and a woman hermit then would put you on that path.
That's correct. To enter into the first initiation of major mysteries, which corresponds to the number 100, requires the combination of those two nines, as you mentioned, two hermits, which are a man and woman, united in transmutation, but also united emotionally, mentally, not just physically. You see, the Divine Mother does not reward cheaters, fornicators, adulterers, liars. Just because a man and woman have sex does not mean they enter into initiation. Just because they're married does not mean that they are going to enter initiation. The power of Esh is the force of love. Esh, that fire, is Christ, love. Samael Aun Weor wrote in The Mystery of the Golden Blossom that the Divine Mother is very demanding and very exact. She does not reward those who betray her. We all betray her. We betray her in our three brains continually by misusing her energies through fornication, whether physically or mentally, through adultery, whether physically or mentally, through lying, through cheating, through stealing, through anger, through envy, through jealousy. All of these are forms of sexual abuse, as they abuse that force. Moreover, Samael Aun Weor explains in that chapter, called Treason, that someone can be performing all of this, sacrificing, trying to work on their ego, transmuting their energies, but they will not awaken Kundalini if they betray their master.
So the duality of Arcanum 18, where you mentioned it could be black, could be white, it represents both aspects, is then for the couple and everything that they would have to face.
That's right. That's the great challenge of tzaddik, or tzadi, this letter, is it represents that duality. You see, even in those schools of the Balim, or what we call black magicians, they call their initiates tzaddikim, tzaddiks. Same word. And they are initiates of black magic, black tantra. They think that they are good and pure and holy and following the covenant and respecting the law. But they are doing it through the ego. That esh is polarized negatively. They work with the power of the esh, but in hell. They don't realize it most of the time. They believe they're on the right path. Some of them are called Kabbalists. Some are called Tantrics. Some are called Christians. Some are called Wiccans. Some are called Rosicrucians. Many names. The bottom line is, the only way to walk the true path is inside, towards one's inner master, through chastity, through charity, through sanctity. The Divine Mother is very demanding. Very few satisfy her requirements. The primary reason, very few are willing to die as an ego. It's not hard to find people who become enchanted with the theme of gnosis, with transmutation, with sacrifice for others. That's why gnosis has spread throughout the world. And there are millions of people who study these teachings in one form or another. But it is exceedingly rare to find someone who lives them, who is truly living in themselves the path. Because in most cases, people just believe it, they follow along, but they don't want to abandon their habits, their ways of seeing things, their ways of believing things. They don't want to die. And this is why we see people stuck in the same problems year after year. The same conflicts, the same fights, the same struggles, the same arguments, the same politics. And this is in all schools, all religions, all movements. This repetition, this cycle of suffering. It's not God doing that. It's the people in those groups who do not want to change. A tzaddik changes. A tzaddik abandons their tendencies inside and revolts against themselves. And much of the time that means they revolt against everybody else's behavior too. And of course, other people don't like that. So a real tzaddik is generally condemned, rejected, exiled, cast out, ridiculed, gossiped about, put down. And a lot of rumors fly. Right? That's what happened with Samael. It's what happened with Jesus. It's what happened with all the great masters. Humanity didn't love them and embrace them. Even their own students betray them and stab them in the back. This is why, as a real tzaddik, the one you rely on is God, not humanity. The job of the tzaddik is to love humanity. And how do you love humanity? By being honest. This is why the prophets, especially Samael Aun Weor, speak so directly. He didn't speak in order to make others impressed with him or to try to get people to love him or believe him. He wrote what he wrote. He said what he said because he loved and loves humanity. If you love someone and you see that they are sick and they are dying, and worse, they are doing it to themselves, will you just pat them on the back and tell them, oh, I love you, and walk away? Or encourage them? Or supply them with what is killing them? We do that. All of us do that. Because we allow each other our pride, our lust. People are married to alcoholics, they buy them the alcohol. People are married to people who are addicted to smoking, and they buy them cigarettes. We give money to addicts on the street. We buy products that feed a system of abuse and corruption. We support systems in our social environment, in our families, that support abuse and corruption. Our world is as it is because of how we are as individuals. The suffering that we have as individuals and as a society are because of how we act. We are not tzaddikim. We are not righteous. We are the creators of pain. If we want to become a tzaddikim, we have to fight, first against ourselves, to change our own tendencies that keep us ignorant and persist in our tendencies to create suffering. Those are pride, which make us feel so self-sustaining and wise. Lust, envy, anger, greed, all of that. And along the way, we have to help others do the same. Sometimes this means we have to be honest, but in a loving way, in a kind way. Love sometimes sounds cruel. This is why some people reject the writings of Samael Aun Weor. They say he sounds too mean, misogynist, that he hates women, or that he hates people, he's too angry. And that's because their ego reacts. The truth is, what he wrote, what he taught, is a great medicine, and we need it. Another question?
Well, what you're talking about also seems on the surface to contradict the saying that we must learn to take in the defects of others with gladness. How does that reconcile itself?
We have to receive the unpleasant manifestations of others with gladness, yes. But this is different from being an accomplice to a crime. There are times at which we must speak. Right? To receive the unpleasant manifestations with gladness means to not become identified, to not become angry, to not seek revenge, to not seek to blame or attack, but instead to speak the truth when it must be spoken. Sometimes we just have to accept and be patient when we're receiving something painful from others, just as Jesus did when he was walking up the path towards his crucifixion. You see, in that process, we see a tzaddikim. We see Nun, Christ, bearing his cross. This is that Yod walking up the hill towards crucifixion. That is a tzadi. He represented that. That is a work of patience. It is to receive the spit and ridicule of others without complaint. Nonetheless, we must speak the truth. If one is silent when one knows the truth, one must be sure that you should be silent. Because there are times you have to be silent. There's no golden rule here except to follow the guidance you get from within. Another question?
How else would you really bringing them to a surface. The Dalai Lama talks about all the time, anybody that's evil will to you, treat him as a gift, because in reality, they are bringing you a gift to know yourself.
It's true. This is why we live in the world. This is why we have life. It's our gymnasium. We need it. Christ couldn't have ascended that path towards his crucifixion unless those people had been there to persecute him, unless the centurions had whipped him, unless Pontius Pilate had committed him, unless Caiaphas had betrayed him, unless Judas had betrayed him. None of it would have been possible. So Jesus owed his ascension to all of those who punished him. Sounds strange, but it's undeniable. And the same is true for us. Our mind wants to blame everyone else and justify our behavior. And what I'm explaining here is very difficult to grasp because the mind interferes. Yet our consciousness can learn to do it. Our consciousness, which is connected with God, with our inner Buddha, has the capacity to remain serene, to remain centered in conscious love in any circumstance. And this is what Jesus was representing, even on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is a conscious attitude of paramita, called prajna, wisdom. Prajna paramita is that supernal knowledge of the two truths that sees beyond conventional reality and sees the absolute, the emptiness. That is right view. How we see beyond superficial appearances and penetrate the truth. When one cultivates the skill to be awake, to be conscious, even when one is receiving blame, insults, betrayal, gossip, people doing terrible things to you, you can still treat them with love. You can treat them with respect, and you can speak the truth. And Samael Aun Weor exemplified that. Towards the end of his life, when he was passing through a great ordeal, and all of his students betrayed him, gossiped, rejected him, stabbing him in the back. What did he do? He treated them with love. He continued teaching, continued writing. We have that capacity in the consciousness as we develop the soul. But the ego can never do it. That's why we don't understand. We know the evil of the ego. That's what we live within. We need to escape from that and learn about the conscious values of the spirit. And then we learn the primary virtue of the Gnostic Church: tolerance. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Of all the virtues we talk about, the main one is tolerance. But tolerance doesn't mean what our sensual mind thinks. Tolerance is conscious love. But tolerance does not stand by and observe a rape. It does not stand by and observe a suicide. It intervenes. It acts. That is a conscious value. It's a good example. In ancient Japan, there was a code known as Bushido, which was the way of the samurai. And the roots of that tradition have conscious values. Unfortunately, it degenerated like most other traditions in the world. But its original value was this: the samurai must act, but without passion. This was the rule. And of course, you probably remember that a samurai was always armed with weapons and was a great warrior and would kill. But why? For justice, for equality, to protect others. Of course, that system degenerated into political wars. But originally, it was a spiritual war. And for the samurai to draw his sword and act required a completely silent mind. And this is how, when we hear the stories of the samurai, we're amazed at what we hear of the incredible skill that they had with a blade or to navigate difficult circumstances. And that was made possible because of Zen, because of a quiet mind. A mind that was completely silent, but awake, active, aware. That is, in its root, the synthesis of all martial arts. The true warrior in every tradition was to uphold that skill. And we see that in people who are guards or watchmen. Something that Samael Aun Weor quoted a lot. To be as a watchman in a time of war. And the Zohar says this: one must guard oneself. But what is it to be a watchman? It is to be a warrior at a post, fully conscious of the knowledge that at any instant the enemy will try to get past our guard. The watchman can't sit there and say, do, 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 do. No. Have you played sports? Were you ever a goalie? Or playing a sport in which at any instant you could be called upon to act? In most sports, you cannot think. You have to pay attention. Very active, attentive to what's happening. And if you get distracted even for an instant, you can lose the game. Right? Most sports are like this. That is precisely the kind of attentiveness we need from moment to moment in our daily lives. To be watchful of ourselves. Because from instant to instant, the enemy is trying to take our esh. That enemy is your ego. It is all those elements in your mind that you've been living within for centuries and that feel normal but are not. Those have to be conquered. And it is a great fight that begins in attentiveness, inner watchfulness.
And I remember the main duties, if I'm correct, of the samurai was always to guard and protect his master. That samurai that was rogue, that didn't do that, was thought of as nothing.
That's right. The samurai who failed in his duty to his lord was a shame. And it developed later that they would have to kill themselves, right? But you see, in the Zohar, in the tradition of Kabbalah, we learn that the tzaddik has to serve his master, right? And it says here, when night falls, he should examine and search his actions that day to repent for his deeds. He should always search them so he can repent before his master. Most people read that and think that that master is a physical person, a teacher, but it's not. It's our innermost. And our duty as a warrior is to our innermost. And our duty to guard over ourselves is to protect our innermost. It sounds strange, but our actions affect God. We are a part of something more than this terrestrial vehicle. And our innermost needs us to fulfill our end of the work, which is to revolt against the mind, to raise the yod up the nun and become a tzaddik. We have to fulfill the purpose of creation, Bereshit. Any other question?
Yeah, what would you say, many students, don't want to interfere with the law of karma or, law of reoccurrence, just like the Tibetan monks, when the nuns were getting raped by the Chinese and evading, they just stood by and thought this was a law of karma and just like, showing compassion. So where's the line drawn really, between, law of karma, just letting it happen and, acting, I guess.
The way you can know when to act and not to act can never be resolved by the mind. Because the mind always reasons, should I do A or B? Which is better? Well, on A's side, there's this and that and this and that. And so says I should do this. And on the B side, so-and-so says I should do this. Opposing action. So the mind always gets in a conflict. The mind can never resolve it. Let me state this clearly. The mind can never resolve problems. Yet all of us are trying to use our mind to resolve our problems. This is our problem. It's true. What can solve our problems is the consciousness, which does not think. Think about that. The consciousness does not think. The consciousness is. Let's look at the tree of life to understand what that means. We have a physical body, which is Malkut. We experience the energy of our vital body through our physical body. As our vital energy, our energy to act, the energy of sex, the energy of our memory and imagination and our perception is all here. We experience emotion, right? Feelings, which is the astral body. We experience thoughts, those birds of the air, which is the mental body, Netzach. Beyond that, we don't usually experience anything that we can define. Sometimes we feel a subtle feeling, I should do this, but I don't know why. Or I should not do that, but I don't know why. That's called intuition. That is from Tiferet, the causal body, the human soul. We usually ignore it because we don't have a reason in the mind to back it up, or we don't have a feeling in the heart to back it up, or we don't have an energy or sensation that wants it in the vital body, or our physical body doesn't have the habit or the knowledge of performing whatever it is we felt. So we have conflict. Because we're not familiar with intuition, with conscious knowledge, we rely on thoughts, on feelings, and on sensations. This is why we are always suffering. Simple like that. We're always suffering because we ignore the impulses that come through intuition, which come from the consciousness, which come from God.
Speaking of sport, do they promote the wrong idea of victory, for example, at the expense of others as opposed to a victory against ourselves?
The question is about victory in sport. Well, we make of sport something egotistical. In ancient times, sport was a conscious value, just like theater and music were, and art. You may recall that amongst the Greeks, amongst the Maya, sport had great spiritual value. And the Maya and the Aztecs had great sports that represented conscious spiritual values. They competed physically, and some won and some lost, but that reflects spiritual achievement or spiritual loss. And eventually those games degenerate, just as our games now are merely about animal competition and have nothing spiritual in them at all. So sport in itself is not bad. It's what we make of it.
Well, Netzach means victory, right?
Yeah, Netzach means victory. Netzach, of course, that victory is in the mind. Definitely. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.